Great. All right. So before I really talk about what color interactions is, I'll just tell you why it's important. There's a lot of reasons, as you could see here. But something we really haven't touched on yet is this phenomenon that if you put colors next to each other, they will change. So this is one of those reasons if you've ever tried to like redecorate a whole room or do anything involving a lot of colors, you might see it a certain way in your head, you might pick everything out individually, but once it comes all together, it might look different than you thought it did. And that's because it's nothing short of magic, really. I mean, it's science, but I also think it's very magical that colors are going to change each other when they're next to each other. Okay, and so there's a lot of different ways that happens, a lot of different like conditions that that would happen. One of them is different lighting, right? And that makes a lot of sense. So if you have an object in a white light, it's going to look different than if you change that light bulb out and it's like a blue light now, right? That's going to change the color of the object. So that makes a lot of sense. Surface reflection, same thing. Like if you have a really shiny surface and it's red, it's going to change the color of your object rather than if it was sitting on like a blue surface. What we're really going to focus on today, and when I was talking about that tongue twister, brain twister thing, that's these two situations or circumstances. Surrounding colors are going to change the color of your object, which is wild, but it's very true. And then this idea of color juxtaposition, which is kind of the same thing, right? Juxtaposition just means two things next to each other. So two colors next to each other, they're going to change each other and influence each other. All right, cool. So let's get into this a little bit. There's two main concepts we'll talk about when we talk about color interactions. The first is simultaneous contrast. And I really want to give y'all some time to write this one down because when we talk about simultaneous contrast, we're talking about one color changing another color. But not only is it changing that color, it's changing all the qualities of that color. So it might make it a different value, a different hue, saturation, and temperature when they're side by side. And that's just, it has so much to do with our brain. It has so much to do with our eyes. It has a lot to do with science. And then there's like a dash of mystery thrown into it all. So I'll give you a second to write that down because I really want y'all to keep in mind it's not just like the hue, it's all the qualities of it too. And so whenever we look at this example right here, what's kind of amazing is this is actually the same exact red. These are the same exact green, but they look like they're different, right? They look like they're different greens. And so which one of these greens looks like a cooler green, the left or the right? Right, the left looks like a cooler green. It's got some blue, looks like it has some blues in it. Which one of these looks like the warmer red? It looks a little different on the projector, but I think you could still tell. Which one looks like it has more reds and oranges in it? Yeah, it's like the middle one, right? Okay. So maybe, okay, yeah, we can see a little better here, right? So this red looks a little warmer. This one looks a little more cooled off. This green looks a little cooler, and this one looks warmer. Yeah, it works bigger. So what's wild about this, oops, is that these two are the same exact red, and these two are the same exact green. But as they get nearer to each other, something happens called simultaneous contrast, where the opposite gets exaggerated. So because green is a cool color, the red is going to look warmer. And because red is warmer color, this green is going to look cooler. So like I said, it's a little bit of a mind bender, but we're going to get into it and y'all will really,
They also put them in different places.
What do you mean?
Green is over the blue stripe.
Yes.
Green, yellow stripe on the back.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so that's really working too, right? Because yellow is a warmer color. So we see that green happening to get cooler, right? So cooler, warmer. Same here. Blue is a cooler color. So the red is going to look warmer. So let's look at a bunch more examples just to bring it all home. What you can write down about this phenomenon before we look at the examples is like kind of the rules, just like what we're talking about. Warm colors look warmer when they're placed next to cool colors. Cool colors look cooler when they're placed next to warm colors. They're already cool, but they're gonna look even cooler. And that's the thing to keep in mind. It's like whatever the opposite already is gonna get more dramatic. And again, we'll look at some examples.
Yeah.
And keep in mind too, we're not just talking about temperature. We'll get to value, we'll get to saturation, we'll get to all that. But right now we'll just focus on temperature for that. In other words, the contrast of the opposites gets amped up. So whatever the opposite is, it gets amplified. It's amplified. Um, okay, so these grays are the same gray. Like these smaller squares are the same exact gray. But because they're being influenced by this bigger background, they're changing. Their qualities are changing. So which of the smaller squares looks darker, left or the right? Right, the one on the right looks darker. And this looks lighter. And just like we were saying, that has everything to do with the opposite that was already in place. So this is already a dark background. This is a light background. So that is going to amplify the opposite of this smaller one. Because this is a light background, this one's going to get darker. Because this is a dark background, this one's going to get lighter. Even though to begin with, it's kind of like it's like mid-tone gray, really. But when we see them together, they influence each other and they interact and everything changes. Okay. So here's our next rule. We just talked about temperature. Cool gets cooler around warm, warm gets warmer around cool. Now we'll talk about value. Light gets lighter around darker colors. Darker colors look darker placed next to a lighter color. That's the way that simultaneous contrast is going to work on value when colors are interacting. And so already y'all are probably drawing the dots and making the connections that when you're making a graphic design, you have to bring the colors together to see how they're going to interact, how they're going to change. You can't just be like, oh, I always use this blue as my go-to blue. I'm going to use an orange and it's going to look this way. When they get together, they're going to start to influence each other and change. Okay. All right, so we have this happening here. These are the same exact pinks, right? And does anyone want to try to describe what's going on based on what we just talked about?
Stand out more about dark, like a light bulb in the dark.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So this one looks a lot lighter, almost seems to glow, like Robert was saying. And then this one looks a little bit darker because it's on a lighter background. Okay. We talked about value, we talked about temperature. What about saturation? Which one of these squares looks more saturated? Left or right? So well, okay, I'll say
Oh,
which,
small.
yeah, so,
Okay.
yeah. So the left background looks more saturated, and the right little square looks more saturated, right? Same thing. Like the fact that those opposites are already in place, the dominant color is going to amplify it. So this dominant saturated background is going to make this smaller square look less saturated. Even though these are the same exact colors, when they are surrounded by something bigger, it's bearing its influence and it's pushing those opposites to the polar ends. Okay. So that's the next thing we can write down. We're like sort of collecting these rules about simultaneous contrast. And we're hitting on all these things like temperature, value. This one's just about saturation. When you put a muted color next to, okay, did I word this right? A muted color next to a muted color. I could word that better. Um, and the saturated one more saturated. Okay, I'm good with that. Um, yeah, so saturation. Oh, what happened? Saturation is going to be influenced by opposites as well. Okay, we might have to see it like this. Um, okay, so again, why does that matter? Make sure my zoom is still, yeah, definitely. This one? Yeah.
Okay, thank
No problem. Okay, so why does it matter as a designer, as an artist, graphic designer, photographer? If you are wanting something to really pop, you can start to use these rules of simultaneous contrast. Whether you want it to look lighter, like it's glowing, whether you want it to look more saturated, also can be in the glowing category. Whether you want something to like tone down or tone up, you start to apply these principles of color interactions like this artist did here. So I've got these values, which we're used to right now. Like if I took a little eyedropper here, it'll tell me the saturation is very low. It's an 8 out of 100. Brightness is pretty low too. So it's like a pretty dark gray, or like a middle gray. 45 is pretty middle. This one has a saturation of 30. That's not that bright. A brightness of 94, which is very bright. And yet it seems to like pop and glow against this background just because of that simultaneous contrast. So if as a designer I'm trying to make a decision on what my background should be, I probably wouldn't choose something that's the same saturation level and the same brightness as this, right? I want that difference. I want that like layer of emphasis. Um, yeah, I think this is the same thing, but I just said like for an instance, if it was like a cool bright blue background, that would be a very different piece, right? Savannah, will you stop clicking, please? Thank you. That would be a very different piece. It would be less contrast and more like blending, smooth, like a little more harmony, but yeah, not as much contrast. Let's see if it'll let me go full screen again. What do y'all think about this one? Yeah, what do y'all think about this one in terms of its simultaneous contrast? Well, I mean, like, does anything feel like it's standing out? Does it feel like it's, yeah, the blue stands out and the green stands out? And what would y'all like owe to that effect? What's happening to make that stand out? Yeah, the darker background. So that's making a really big difference. A dark background is making the light really pop. And if I can zoom in, yes, okay. Um, things that are glowing also have a little bit of contrast going on too, right? So we've got all these little like marks within the green area, and some of them are very saturated and light, and some of them are less saturated and dark. And even that contrast alone is like making those little moments of high saturation and brightness look like it's glowing. Okay, so that's that. And this is just a preview of an artist that works only in color, and they put all sorts of color variables together. Like they'll layer colors that are saturated, desaturated, bright, dark, and we get sort of like a push and a pull of those opposites in the eye, which is like really interesting. Okay, so that was simultaneous contrast. The second concept that we're going to talk about in color interactions is something called subtraction. And what you need to know about subtraction is when a strong or dominant color subtracts its hue from a smaller one, we get this phenomenon called subtraction. And when I say a strong dominant color, I'm talking about things that are darker. Those are dominant. Things that are bigger, like we saw in the last examples, those really big backgrounds were like the dominant color versus like the little small squares. When things are more saturated, darker, and bigger, we call them the dominant color. But bigger is like the thing that matters the most, honestly. Like the bigger the ground or background, the more it's going to bear its influence. And so out of both of these, I think this is the most magical phenomenon of them all. And so when y'all are done typing, I'll show you all some examples, but it's actually very wild how it all works. Okay. There you go. Okay, so these X's are the same color, but because of their background, they look different, right? And so if I go back to what I was just saying about this phenomenon of subtraction, we've got our dominant colors back here. They're the biggest color in the whole field. Then we have these really small, thin elements. And you can see that this big dominant color is going to subtract from these smaller elements. And what's happening, so if you think about this color purple, you can think of it as made of cyan and magenta or red and blue. Either color model will work for this idea. So let's say red and blue make purple. Which of these, the top or the bottom, which has more red in the background? The one at the top, right? The one at the top is going to have a little bit more red or magenta, if you will. And so it is subtracting that from the smaller shape. It's subtracting the red out, and now we get this like purple X, but it's got more blue or cyan in it. Same thing is happening down here. This is a sort of purple, and it's got a lot more blue in it, a lot more cyan. So it is subtracting itself from the smaller X. It's making this X have more red or magenta, whatever color model you want to think of it in. And when they come together right here, you can see it is the same color. They just look so different. It's so cool and crazy. Okay. Now, bringing it all together, we've got these two squares in the middle, which are the same color, actually. And they're being influenced by so many different things. What are some of the things that are making them look different? There's like probably 4 or 5 things, so you could say any of them. Yeah. Right here and here? Yep.
Cooler and more saturated.
Which one?
One on that. Red,
Yeah.
I was red being cooler and more saturated.
Yes. And then that's making this one look less saturated and warmer. Or cooler, actually, because this one's a little warmer than this one right here. Yeah, so it's also doing that thing we just talked about, which is subtraction, right? So if we think of orange is made of red and yellow, we can think of the fact that red is being subtracted from this orange, making it more yellow. Yellow is subtracting from this orange, making it a little more red than this one, right? So all those things. Vocabulary word you don't really need to know, but just if you ever come across it in some art literature or any sort of analysis, when we talk about the main hue, we're talking about the mass tone, like that main mass, the dominant mass main color. And then the overtone is the secondary color. So that would be like the X. And so when you do your own project, you're gonna make one example of subtraction and one example of simultaneous contrast. And when you do subtraction, you're gonna be doing, you know, two different mass tones and one overtone, basically. But we'll get into that. This is an example that's kind of subtle, but it's really driving everything home, right? These pigs are like a pink gray. And so we have these dominant mass colors, mass tones that are pink and gray. And you can see that in this one, like which pig is more gray? I'll ask that question. Right or left? Yeah. The right one's a little more gray. And that makes a lot of sense when we think about subtraction because we've got this gray mass and it's making this one look more pink. And now we have this pink mass, which is subtracting the pink out and making it look more gray. So this is a really subtle example, but nonetheless, it's still at play, still working. Okay, when you do a project for subtraction, and I'll give you all more details too, you're trying to make something like these. These look like color studies. Nothing fancy, nothing that you'll put in your portfolio, but you'll probably spend a lot of time on it just experimenting, being like, how can I make two different colors, this one and this one, look very similar, almost like they're one color. That's some of the stuff we'll get up to today and next time. Okay, so pop quiz to sort of wrap all those concepts up. If we have these two backgrounds and we have this one in the middle, this one's called chromatic gray. Which of these two backgrounds will make the chromatic gray appear more saturated? A, right? Because B is already very saturated, it's gonna make it look less saturated. A is pretty desaturated, so this one's gonna pop more. Exactly. What about this one? Which of these grounds will make the green appear darker in value?
A.
Yeah, it's gonna be A because it's lighter, right? It's that simultaneous contrast. It's already lighter, so it's gonna make this one look darker. Okay, back to subtraction, which we just talked about. This is like, surprisingly, this has a lot of blue in it, but this is a blue and an orange. Which of these grounds will make it appear more orange?
A.
Yes, yes. Okay, yeah. So y'all are really getting it. Okay, those are the two main concepts I want y'all to know: simultaneous contrast, subtraction. But I wanted to throw in a few other things here because color theory class, I want y'all to get as much color theory as we can. And this is really helpful, especially if you're working in 2D art or if you're a graphic designer and you want to make the illusion of transparency. You can see here that this is like a painting, right? This isn't actually a transparent piece of material, but it looks like it is. And that just has to do with a change in darkness, basically. So there's like a value change that's happening. And it is giving that illusion. And it's also like taking color in from the background, right? So this is like a purple color and it's like taking in some of the orange. So it's like a purple, orange, purple, green, purple, red, and purple, yellow. There's another phenomenon which is really cool and really straightforward. It's not like so much a mind bender like these other concepts, called memorism. And I wrote the definition in the next slide, but I have this example first, which is that objects sometimes can look the same color and the same light. And then when you change the lighting situation, you realize they're actually different colors. And so what this has to do with is the chemical makeup of the objects. Different inks, different pigments, different dyes, they all have different chemical makeups. And so that can sort of like become apparent based on the lighting situation. So I'll leave that up for a second. Um, yeah. After this, the last thing I want to show y'all is just examples of different artists that devote their whole life, their whole artistic practice just to color interactions, basically. Like that is their bread and butter. That is like what keeps them up at night and needing to make the art. And maybe you'll have seen some of these artists. I don't think the NOMA has any of these pieces, but I know in Baton Rouge they have some Rothkos. But yeah, we'll get to that. Are y'all good with me to go forward? Okay. All right. Has anyone seen one of these? Mark Rothko's, they're just really, they're huge. They don't even look that big right now, but like I would be like standing right here, probably. And some people, yeah, are obsessed with these, but they're just fields of color and they really, I don't know, some people really like it and are like moved. Like there's like a book. Huh?
I said big moves.
Big moods. Yes. Yeah, some people really get a lot of feeling and emotion from them. Yves Klein, he came up with his own shade of blue, and a lot of his art is blue. I saw one of these in New York, and yeah, it's just like a field of blue, really. And then Joseph Albers, he is like the color guru person. Like he wrote books on it. A lot of color theory curriculum comes from in part from some of his books because he just did so many color studies and like figured out so many phenomenons. But yeah, he's the color square guy. No need to write this down, but these are just some last final thoughts. So color theory obviously plays a really important role in art, artist work, and it really matters a lot of these different qualities like warmth, temperature, value, brightness, hue, all these things as they're coming together, they're all affecting each other. So especially if you are painting, it's nice to have your little color palette, right? Your swatches, like you do like a test color palette. Graphic design, we have the luxury of just like click, Control Z, undo. Like it's a lot quicker. But I think, yeah, anytime you're doing like a really big project, things that are like slower, it's really good to like test out these interactions and see how they're gonna play with each other, especially when it comes to quantity. Like more of a color is often gonna bear its influence rather than these little accents or pops. Okay, so I want to go over the projects for today. And again, they're just going to look like studies essentially, and you're going to create them in Adobe Illustrator, just like a 10 by 8 document, two same size rectangles within that document, and those are going to be your big dominant ground colors. For this first one color appears as two. This is simultaneous contrast. You're going to have the same color, and you want to design your backgrounds so they look as different as possible, which it might be a little harder than you think. But you see this one just looks like it's absolutely glowing. Like it's like, yeah, it's almost like the edges are disappearing. And then this one is like, you know, it's feels like more solid and a little bit less saturated. But they are the same color, as you can see. The second thing you're going to do, separate document, is you're going to make two different colors look alike. So that is the subtraction of color. So you're going to do same thing, a 10 by 8 document, two same size rectangles, that's your ground. And this, you're going the opposite direction. You want two different colors, but you want them to look the same. And this is actually very hard, but you're using, okay, I'll give you a tip, is like try to start neutral with your smaller colors, because your background colors, if they are like at one end or the other, they can really start to like bear their influence. But yeah, you can see that these are two different colors, but when I look at them right here, I'm like, oh, those looks very similar. I mean, this one is like a little lighter, of course, but they're pretty freaking close. I think if I like maybe even lightened up this red, it could darken this color a little bit. Yeah, and then make sure you show your colors together. Ideally, like it would be a line connecting them. I might remake this student example just to like have that line connecting them, but we have today and we have next class to experiment. So yeah, that's what we're doing today in next class. Moving forward, we're gonna do a color profile. Like we'll really get into some graphic design type project as if we're like creating a brand identity and color profile. And then after that, we'll start to get into our like final project territory. So we're really moving along. I think we have 6 classes after this. So yeah. All right, so that's that. I'm gonna stop the video and have it for y'all.